The Nintendo Switch 2 probably just got a massive upgrade, and we need to talk about that before we get into all of the things that are happening with this system, because I do think that 2026 is going to be a huge year for the Nintendo Switch 2 going forward, and there's going to be a lot of changes when it comes to the makeup and the style of what some developers are going to be doing, because the industry is changing all of the time. AI is taking over a lot of different places. There are companies that are making sweeping changes to support more systems, and there's just a big shift overall in what developers are doing in order to get to more consumers out there, as consoles have been up and down overall, and as portable PCs are starting to flood the market with their expensive prices, and all sorts of stuff is just happening. Obviously, PC gaming is continuing to be PC gaming overall. Mobile gaming is being mobile gaming. So there is a lot to get into, but I want to focus in on what's happening with the Nintendo Switch 2, because there is a lot of good stuff. Now, apparently, something that Nintendo Switch 2 has struggled a bit with is Unreal Engine 5 and Unreal Engine optimization, but it does seem like help is on the way, because a huge performance boost is going to be coming, along with a number of other things that I want to talk about. So on this article here, it's from Nintendo Duo, but there's been multiple people that have talked about it here. It states that Nintendo Switch 2 improves its performance by up to 40% thanks to the new Unreal Engine 5.7 and Fame generation for the Nintendo Switch 2 ? So Studio Wildcard has revealed that they are working on a next-gen version of Ark Survival Ascended for the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, in an interview with WCCF Tech, co-creator and director plus lead programmer Jeremy S. confirmed that they are experimenting with the new Unreal Engine 5.7, which has resulted in up to a 40% performance improvement on Nintendo's newest console. In a rather lengthy statement, Jeremy states that they are aiming for 30 frames per second in the Nintendo Switch 2 version of Ark Survival Ascended, a goal that was unfeasible before UE version 5.7. However, they now have the goal closer to being achieved. Here's what he had to say exactly. It had to be a solid 30 FPS experience, and we were about halfway there to achieve that. That was before testing with Unreal Engine 5.7. We've seen gains of between 33% and 40% in the overall frame rate. It was completely GPU dependent in those scenes. It managed to gain 33 to 40% on the GPU. That was very, very good, but still not enough to achieve a solid 30 FPS. Now, he also explained that there is an improvement and extra effort is needed to reach 30 FPS on Switch 2, especially since they want its graphics to be more similar to those on the PS5 and Xbox Series X, better than those of the Xbox Series S. In fact, they aim for the game to run at 1080p in handheld mode and 1440p on a TV. So how will they achieve this? They are now focusing on the frame generation technology used by both Nvidia and AMD. Hasn't yet been adapted for the Nintendo Switch 2, and the developer has approached Nvidia for the console's chip, but they've only responded that it's not currently compatible without ruling out future compatibility. Their goal now is to figure out how to implement frame generation technology on the Nintendo Switch 2 to achieve the extra performance they desire. Will they succeed? The recent leak in a new version of the technology reminds us that it continues to evolve, and that Nintendo Switch 2's DLSS can also improve over time, so it's something to keep in mind. So very interesting there when it comes to that. And for me, it's not necessarily about this game. That's great if they get this game going, or whatever the case is. It's about that there's still new improvements and new things happening with this technology when it comes to DLSS, when it comes to frame generation, when it comes to everything that they're working on so far. If you look at what Nintendo's done with this system as a hybrid for $450, as we got a brand new Lenovo Legion Go Steam OS announced for $1,100, actually no, $1,200, $1,199 that was announced recently. It kind of goes to show you, like, okay, yes, those are super powerful, those are great, but nowhere near as affordable at all in terms of a powerful handheld or hybrid platform. Up to $1,000. Steam Deck OLED is $550 and weaker than the Nintendo Switch 2, plus it doesn't come with a dock. So it's one of those things to where you saw the whole situation with drop the price and the price is too high for the system and certain aspects about it, but you're starting to see exactly the cost of doing business when it comes to a hybrid, when it comes to a portable platform that you can play anywhere but then also hook up to the TV. You're going to be spending, with a lot of other places, upward of $500 and something plus up to $1,000 with the newest things in order to get some of these big games running decent enough whereas the Nintendo Switch 2 has that for $450. So it's just interesting to note, considering what people were saying last year and even what we saw some of the big channels saying overall. Now, another thing that I want to talk about here is not just what these companies are doing, because while they're going to be using, these big graphical featured games, but the big thing here for me is Nintendo and what they're going to do. Nintendo still has not used the full capabilities of the Nintendo Switch 2 at this point. Nintendo's internal teams have not done that. Now, have they updated games to run and look better and be awesome? Absolutely. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, those run and look great, but those are originally base Nintendo Switch 1 games, and in Breath of the Wild's case, that is a base Wii U game overall. We still have not gotten that next big 3D Zelda and other games that we're going to talk about in just a bit that are so important to the overall success of this system. But Nintendo's Switch 2 titles that they've released as the Nintendo Switch 2 has progressed, that are built for the system, with Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, and even Kirby Air Riders. That was developed by Masahiro Sakurai, Bandai Namco's team, but you guys know what I'm talking about. The games that are built specifically for the Nintendo Switch 2. There's no Nintendo Switch 1 version. All of those games are not fully taking advantage of the Nintendo Switch 2, even to the point to where Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, a game that's essentially a Nintendo Switch 1 game, is probably the best looking and performing game on the platform, despite there being a Nintendo Switch 1 version of the game. I'm looking forward to the time to where Nintendo actually is able to say, this is a fully fledged, built specifically for the Nintendo Switch 2, using all of its features overall in terms of what it can do with DLSS and other things when it comes to the system. That's something that we haven't quite seen. Now, we've seen Mario Kart World. That game's not possible on the Nintendo Switch 1, at least with the resolution and frame rate that they're going for. It's a really nice game. I think it does really well, but it doesn't use all of the features just yet. Same thing goes for Donkey Kong Bonanza, because that game's impressive and it looks great, and obviously would not be able to be in the way that it is on the Nintendo Switch 1, but they did have some concepts and try to maybe see if it was going to happen, but it just didn't work when it came to the Switch 1. Same thing for Mario Kart World. Just didn't work when it came to the Switch 1. Switch 2 came and kind of saved those games overall, becoming much better than what they would have been if they were Nintendo Switch 1 games. So what I'm looking forward to seeing is when Nintendo says, okay, those games, the cross-generation, that is done, and now we're full bore on Switch 2. And Nintendo actually stated this when it came to Mr. Furukawa discussing at an investor meeting, saying, hey, what's going on with Switch 1 and Switch 2? They've essentially moved over full development for Switch 2. So going forward, you should see most of their games that are newly announced be specifically Nintendo Switch 2 games. You're still going to have some titles that were already announced last year, like Tomodachi Life, or whenever those were announced, that, yeah, those are going to be Switch 1 games. Rhythm Heaven Groove, that's going to be a Switch 1 game as well. But a lot of stuff going forward when it comes to new announcements, like at upcoming Nintendo Directs, for example, that should be going down between February or March or so this year. That should be happening soon. I think that it's going to be all pretty much big Switch 2 titles overall. They're moving on from the Switch 1, but Switch 1's still going to get some love with stuff like Tomodachi Life, like I said, and even Rhythm Heaven Groove. I'm pretty sure there'll be Nintendo Switch 2 updates for those games, like we saw with Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, where you can just buy the game on the Nintendo Switch 1, and then you can download a free 4K update or something like that. So this is the year I think we see some of those games. A lot of exciting possibilities. Monolith Soft's new title, for example, should be a game that could pop up sometime this year. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention here, which kind of goes hand in hand with what's happening with the Nintendo Switch 2, and I think that you're going to see a massive shift. I mean, we're already seeing a shift with this, but even a bigger one in 2026 and 2027 is the Japanese development support. We're getting reports, which I'll probably have a video on this later down the line, guys, but we're getting reports that the Nintendo Switch 2 sold upward of 11 times more than the PlayStation 5 in Japan this past holiday season. All Japanese developers are on point on this. They are all on point. They all know what's happening. They see the sales numbers. They saw what happened with Nintendo Switch 1, and they're not trying to miss out on what's happening with the Nintendo Switch 2. So I fully expect essentially 100% or near 100% from Japanese developers for all games, AAA games, AA games, indie games, almost near 100% support for the Nintendo Switch 2 by the end of the year or next year. We still have a few stragglers when it comes to the Japanese games. There are still a couple of games. The new Bloodstained game that hasn't been announced for the Switch 2 yet, I think that's coming. We have a number of Bandai Namco titles that are already announced or came out, and stuff that's not set for the Nintendo Switch 2, like Code Vein. We still need some older games as well coming over. I think that's going to get pretty much shaped up and fixed within this year and next year for them. Bandai Namco was also slow to get on point when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 1. I think that the issue is when they have some of their developers that are not actually part of Bandai Namco, they hire an outside studio, and those studios don't have access or the trust to get development kits super early, and I think that creates a little bit of a problem, whereas certain studios within Bandai Namco, like Sora, working with Nintendo and Bandai Namco to deliver Kirby Air Riders, for example, they are working directly with Bandai Namco within their studios. It's trusted a bit more, and I think that that's how that kind of happens with that, whereas some of the other games like Digimon and all that, no access in that sense. So I would expect games like Digimon and Code Vein and other titles that are not announced for the Switch 2 yet to be announced, and I think that's going to be huge when it comes to Nintendo going forward, because it did take quite some time with the Nintendo Switch 1 to get more Japanese developers on board. It took about a good 2 years or so to really get more Japanese developers to start supporting the system regularly. We've essentially seen that from near the beginning, with developers actually rushing out ports to be on the system, like Atlas with Persona 3 Reload. Rushed that out, didn't have the 60 FPS ready. Clearly the system was more than capable than getting 60 FPS, but had it at 30 FPS with frame rate issues just so they can get it out at the time. That never happened on Nintendo home consoles before. Did not happen on the Nintendo Switch 1. We had to wait a while to even get Persona or anything like that. So I do think that Japanese developers are going to be all on board and up to date to not just getting the games out, because we don't want just rushed games, but actually having more time with the dev kits, being able to develop more on those dev kits with the Nintendo Switch 2, and more Japanese developers just getting those dev kits in general and spending that quality time that they need to actually make solid ports of these games. So I'm fully expecting for Japan to be 100% on board by 2027, and that's obviously going to be good news for us gamers, as we're going to get more and more games. I do think that there also could be a pretty big and vibrant indie scene that pops up in Japan, as we've seen with one game called Orbitals that I want to make sure that I talk about. That is a indie game made in Japan. That's essentially like a retro 80s anime inspired split fiction, super cool co-op type of game, and that game was announced as an exclusive for the Nintendo Switch 2. That type of confidence doesn't come from a system that's not doing well or doesn't have that full Japanese support, where you can clearly see from the very beginning, or that you knew ahead of time, because they've been developing this game for a while now, that this was going to be the dominant platform and you're going to have enough people to sell the game to that's this style of game at least. It could come over to other platforms later. I wouldn't be surprised if it did, but I think that they were really targeting that because maybe they were looking at it like, okay, split fiction and that type of stuff, that's kind of on other systems, but we can kind of make our own that kind of suits a little bit more of the Nintendo gamers type of taste with this type of art style and everything. So I think stuff like that could happen more and more when it comes to AA and when it comes to indie style of games, getting independent publishers across Europe or even in the US to publish these games. So that is something to look out for quite a bit, because I don't think Orbitals is a one-off. I think there are going to be other games randomly announced at different times that are going to just pop up and say, oh wow, that looks pretty cool, and it's coming to Nintendo Switch 2, or more like that's like the target platform and maybe it comes over to other platforms as well. Now, another important thing here that I think that is separate and different from pretty much every single other time in Nintendo's history, and it's a little bit of something to where kind of you see it with the Switch 1, but really Nintendo is full focused, full bore on one platform pretty much at the beginning. Yes, you have some old games from Switch 1 that Nintendo's still doing dual launch, but those games were already in development for quite some time. The continued support of the Nintendo Switch 1 is not going to be what we saw when it comes to other Nintendo platforms, or when it comes to supporting two platforms at the same time, like Nintendo's done before in the past, that caused issues with game droughts and potentially even delays in certain things because they're developing on two completely different type of systems, which I think doomed them at some point. It all kind of caught up to them overall. But with the Nintendo Switch 1, after the number of years of support with the 3DS even went parallel with Switch 1, once they dropped that, it was full bore on the Nintendo Switch 1, and you just saw game after game after game after game come. with the Nintendo Switch 2, they're dropping it even sooner than what we saw with the 3DS and the Nintendo Switch 1. And obviously, it's nowhere near like it was before, as they were supporting 2 platforms in the Wii U 3DS era or DS Wii era. And we saw droughts in those eras when it comes to the home consoles overall. With the Nintendo Switch 2, you're not going to get that. Games are going to be developed longer in terms of taking the time to develop the games, but you're going to have all their developers, and they're going to even recruit more developers, and they're purchasing more in order to make sure that they have enough staff to get all of that done. What do I mean by that? Well, look at what they did with Shiver. They purchased them. How about Next Level Games? Make sure you lock down the people that make Luigi's Mansion, and maybe even turn them even to a bigger studio to where they can make another franchise as well. Look at what they did with Bandai Namco Singapore, where they actually purchased that studio. So over the last number of years, Nintendo has loaded up to make sure that they don't have those droughts or issues with game development or resources going forward, as the Switch 2 does take more resources and time to create their games, but they didn't go all in. It's not like they're making a super computer powerful PC that's going to take 55 years to make games and everything. I think it's one of the perfect balances of power and performance and affordability that's going to suit them well in the long run. As like I stated before, you're starting to see quite a number of systems pop up, hybrids and all these different type of things that are upward of $1,000 plus. Steam, when it comes to Valve and what they did, they just dropped their cheapest model of the Steam Deck, the $400 model that everyone said you can get a $400 Steam Deck. Don't buy Switch 2 when it comes to some of the people saying that. Buy the $400 Steam Deck. Well, they discontinued that. Now it's $550 and up, and I don't think it's going to get any cheaper going forward, considering how the technology is progressing, considering how much RAM is getting, which price increases could happen with the Nintendo Switch 2 as well. But I still think that they're positioned pretty good right now at that $450 to $500 range if you're getting the game with the system like Pokemon or Mario Kart World. So to me, at least, Nintendo's going to try to throw everything that they have at this system. So that means you're going to get pretty much all of these games that are going to be system seller S-tier type of games. We've seen at least one of them right now with Mario Kart World, which is a massive system seller. Obviously 70 million units sold with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Nintendo Switch, but Mario Kart's always been a big system seller on pretty much every platform that it's been on, but we still need more of those S-tier ones. What are the biggest games? 3D Mario, 3D Zelda, Super Smash Brothers, Pokemon, Animal Crossing, Mario Party, a brand new Mario Party game. These are the type of games that are the S-tier system sellers that are going to drive the system. Switch 2's already sold as much as it has, and it doesn't even have any of those yet. So I fully expect those S-tier system sellers, maybe a couple more to be announced this year with the 3D Mario for this year, in addition to a Gen 10 Pokemon as well. So I do think that is going to be interesting to see exactly how, things shape up after those games come out. I can't wait to see all the different announcements and stuff that's going to potentially happen at Nintendo Directs. It's just super exciting to kind of get back into the swing of things after a little bit of a lull at the end of the Nintendo Switch 1 era and them transitioning to Nintendo Switch 2, all of the rumors, all of the this and that and crazy videos and stuff. It's cool to be able to get into the thick of it again. A clean slate of new Nintendo Directs that are going to be happening this year and games that should be launching specifically for the Nintendo Switch 2. So very exciting overall, but I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys have to say. What do you think about all of this? Let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.